Isabella's desperate scream echoed through the runners of the Whitmore mansion at 3:47 a.m. "Someone, please, the baby is not breathing." Rosa Martinez, who slept in the small funds room reserved for the domestic team, was the first to get to the luxurious children's room. At 34, this Salvadorana immigrant had worked as a nurse in his home country before crossing the border in search of a better life for his two children. Little Thomas, just 8 months old, was purple in the crib, clearly choked. His mother, Isabella Whitmore, wife of the real estate Richard Whitmore, was in full panic, trembling and shouting hysterically. The other mansion employees remained real estate in the hallway, paralyzed by the fear of doing something wrong. "Call an ambulance," Rosa shouted to Isabella as she took the baby on her lap with accurate and confident movements. His years of medical experience emerged instantly, even after 3 years cleaning houses to survive in the United States. With impeccable technique, Rosa became the baby with stomach, supporting him in his forearm, and applied 5 firm but careful blows among the shoulder blades. In the 6th blow, a small plastic toy flew from Thomas's throat, which immediately began to cry, the most beautiful sound that house had ever heard. "My God, you saved my son." Isabella hugged Rosa, tears running down her face. "How did you know what to do?" "I was a nurse at El Salvador National Hospital," Rosa responded softly. "Ninar Thomas, until he calms down. I worked in the pediatric emergency sector for 8 years. Before, first of all, change." His words carried the weight of an unlisted story, the story of a respected professional who had lost everything when gang violence forced his family to flee. For years she had saved lives in her country. Now in the United States, their experienced hands spent their days rubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms. Richard Whitmore appeared at the bedroom door, still in pajamas, watching the scene with an expression that Rosa could not completely decipher, something between relief, gratitude, and surprise, as if he were first seeing the cleaning lady as a real human being, with skills and a story of his own. Are you a doctor?" asked Richard incredulously. "It was," Rosa simply answered Thomas back to Isabella's arms. "My diploma is not recognized here. I'm trying to do the revalidation, but it's complicated." In the following days, Rosa noticed subtle changes in the behavior of the bosses. Isabella treated her with a genuine affection that did not exist before, asked her sons Miguel and Sofia, offered leftover food for her to take home. But Richard seemed to be planning something. Rosa had noticed the whispers late at night, the mysterious calls, the documents scattered around the office table when she was going to clean, rolls with universities' logos, medical forms, scribbled telephone numbers. His experience told him that rich people do not make favor for goodness in their hearts. There is always a reason behind it. During his 2 decades of life, Rosa had developed a keen instinct to recognize when someone was plotting something. It was the same feeling as he had when he realized that they would have to escape El Salvador, weeks before his neighbor was kidnapped by the same gang that had threatened her husband. "Rosa," Richard called her one morning, 3 weeks after the incident. "I need to talk to you about something important, something that will completely change your life." He held a brown leather paste, and his eyes shone with an intensity she had never seen before. In the background, Rosa felt that this conversation would not just be about a salary increase or better working conditions. While she remained there, a cleaning cloth still in the calloused hands, Rosa felt that that moment would mark the beginning of something much bigger than she could imagine. His instincts, sharply for the years of struggle for survival, whispered that the true reward for saving Thomas was just beginning. What Rosa didn't know was that Richard Whitmore kept much deeper secrets than she could suspect. Secrets that connected her own story in a way that would challenge everything she believed about coincidences and destiny. If you are enjoying this story of overcoming, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of heroism can trigger a series of events that no one could ever predict, not even Pink. "Rose, feel." Richard pointed to the leather chair in front of his imposing office table. His words sounded kind, but there was something in his eyes that made Rose feel like being evaluated, studied. The brown folder remained closed between him as a secret waiting to be revealed. Richard drummed his fingers on the table, apparently organizing his thoughts. "You saved my son. This is not something that ears easily." "I just did what anyone would do," Rosa answered modestly, her hands intertwined on her lap. "No," Richard shook his head. "Anyone would have panicked. Anyone would have been paralyzed. You acted as a professional." He paused, "like the nurse you really are." During the following weeks, Rosa began to realize strange changes in the routine of the house. Isabella asked her opinion about Thomas's minor health problems, if a skin irritation was normal, if sleep patterns were appropriate. It was as if suddenly his medical experience was valued. But the true transformations took place away from the eyes of Rose. Richard had hired a private researcher to research her past. The reports arrived discreetly: diplomas, professional history at the San Salvador National Hospital, references from colleagues, even photos of her working in the pediatric emergency. 8 years saving children, Richard muttered to himself, flipping through his pages. Award for Medical Excellence in 2019. Specialization in pediatric emergencies. He paused in a picture where Rosa was smiling next to a child who had just saved from a serious accident. Why is the hell of this quality cleaning my house? The answer came on the following pages of the report. The escalation of gang violence in El Salvador. Threats to the family. The desperate escape. They killed their neighbor's husband because he refused to pay extortion. Richard read aloud. Rosa received the same ultimatum a week later. Meanwhile, Rosa remained her daily routine, not knowing that her movement was being secretly documented and analyzed. She noticed that Richard watched her different now, not with a distant eye from a boss to a maid, but with something that seemed respect. Miguel has a sore throat again, Rosa commented to Isabella while organizing her family medicines in the kitchen closet. At the popular pharmacy, they don't have the antibiotic he needs. I will try to get a recipe at the health clinic, but the line is always 3 hours. Isabella frowned. Why don't you take him to a private doctor? Can I lend the money? Rosa smiled sadly. In a private consultation, they charge more than I get a whole week. And there is still the exams. She shook her head. In the end, it comes out more expensive than I can pay. What Rosa didn't know was that Richard was listening to the hallway conversation. That night, he made several mysterious telephone calls. Yes, University of Georgetown, medical department. I want to know about revalidation programs for foreign professionals. No, it's not for me. The next morning, Rosa found a sealed envelope on the kitchen table with her name written in elegant lyrics. Inside, a medical consultation card for Miguel at one of the most expensive pediatric clinics in the city, with all expenses already paid. I can't accept it, she told Richard, who pretended to be surprised to see the card. Accept what? He responded with an enigmatic smile. I don't know anything about it. Maybe Isabella left there. But Rosa knew the difference between Isabella's female handwriting and the envelope male and angular writing. His instincts whispered that Richard Whitmore was plotting something much greater than simple goodness. During Miguel's consultation, pediatrician Dr. Roberts asked several strange questions about Rosa's medical experience. Your mother seems to know a lot about medicine, he commented casually. Did she study in the area? My mother was a nurse, Miguel answered proudly. She saved children every day before we came here. Dr. Roberts scored something in the medical record, and Rosa couldn't swing the feeling that there was something orchestrated throughout that situation, as if each piece was being carefully positioned in a chessboard that she could not see completely. That night, while cleaning Richard's office, Rosa noticed different papers around the table. They were no longer real estate business documents. These were universities' forms, medical residency programs, foreign diplomas, revalidation criteria. For a moment, when Rosa raised her eyes and saw Richard stopped at the door watching her, she had the strange feeling that she was no longer the only person in that house keeping secrets. The smile he gave him was warm, almost paternal, but there were depths in those eyes that suggested that the true reward for saving Thomas was just beginning to take shape. What Rosa had no idea was that Richard Whitmore wasn't just a rich man trying to return a favor. He was about to offer something that would change not only his life, but his family's life, forever. What would you like to do with your life, Rosa? Richard asked as he opened the leather paste. If money and paperwork weren't obstacles, where would you see each other in 5 years? Rosa hesitated. It was the first time in 3 years that someone had asked him that question. I would like to go back to work as a nurse, save lives again. Richard smiled and removed a document from the folder. Special Medical Revalidation Program, Georgetown University. He slid the paper through the table. Full scholarship, free student housing for you and your children. Monthly salary during studies. Rosa's eyes filled with tears as she read the official document. It was real, signed, stamped, approved. I can't accept it. Why? Why would you do it for me? Because, Richard leaned back in his chair. 15 years ago, a Salvadoran nurse saved my life in a hospital in San Salvador. I was a young idiot entrepreneur trying to expand business in Central America when I was shot during a robbery. Rosa's heart stopped. National Hospital, emergency sector. She worked for 8 hours in complicated surgery. He stayed with me throughout the recovery, even not speaking English right. He said he had 2 young children at home but could not let me die away from my family. Richard paused. His name was Rosa Martinez. Rosa took her hand to her chest, trying to process the information. I remember you, the American who cries for his mother during the fever. You saved my life twice, Rosa. First 15 years ago and now saved my son. I don't believe in coincidences. In the following weeks, something extraordinary began to happen. Rosa found that Richard had done much more than just paying for a scholarship. He had hired immigration lawyers to completely regularize her and children's status. He had organized university housing, full medical care, and even a tutor to help Miguel and Sofia with English. "Why so much?" Rosa asked one morning, still not believing in the transformation of her life. "Because I discovered something about you, Rosa," Richard replied, showing him the investigator's report. "You were not just an ordinary nurse. You were the chief of the pediatric emergency department." She had the highest survival rates of critical children throughout Central America. Rosa read her own qualifications as if she was meeting a person of the past. Medical awards, published research, letters of recommendation of hospital directors, an entire life of professional excellence that had been reduced to cleaning floors in the United States. "Do you know what I found most?" Richard continued. "You have developed an emergency protocol for choked babies that was adopted by hospitals across the country, the same protocol you used to save Thomas." During university preparations, Rosa met Dr. Patricia Williams, director of the Georgetown Medical Program. "Rosa Martinez," she said with a warm smile, "I read all your work on pediatric emergencies. They are impressive. Why did it take so long to come to us?" I didn't know my experience was worth here," Rosa confessed. "Value?" Dr. Williams laughed. "Rosa, you will be our senior instructor in emergency procedures as soon as you complete the revalidation. We have hospitals across the country wanting to implement their protocols." Isabella was also involved in the transformation of Rosa's life. She organized a savings account for the studies of Miguel and Sofia, and even more importantly, became a genuine friend. "Richard told me the whole story," she said. "You haven't just saved our Thomas. You saved my husband years ago, and now you are saving our family again by showing us what really matters." But Rosa was not just receiving help. She was secretly preparing to give something in return that would surprise Richard. During her free nights, she had begun to translate her medical protocols into Spanish and create a pediatric emergency training program specifically focused on immigrant communities. "There are as many families as mine," she explained to Isabella while working on the documents. "People with medical knowledge who don't know how to validate their experience. Children dying because parents don't know basic first aid procedures." Dr. Williams was impressed when Rosa presented the project. "This is revolutionary, Rosa. A medical training center for needy communities, especially immigrant families. Why not do we test it before?" The true reward Rosa planned to offer Richard was not gratitude. It was to create something that would save thousands of lives. During the day, he studied for his revalidation, but during the nights, he secretly developed the project of his community medical center. "I have a proposal," Rosa said to Richard one morning, 3 months after starting her studies. She placed a detailed folder on the office table, the same place where everything had started. "Rosa Martinez Community Medical Training Center," Richard read aloud. "Free first aid training, emergency procedures, and guidance for validation of medical credentials for immigrant communities." He looked up, impressed. "That is, it's my way of transforming your kindness into something much bigger," Rose interrupted. "You saved my life by giving me this opportunity. Now I want to save hundreds of other lives." Richard leafed the detailed project, seeing budgets, implementation plans, partnerships with hospitals, certification programs. It was the work of someone who understood not only medicine but administration, education, and social impact. "Rosa," he finally said, "do you have any idea what you just showed me?" She smiled for the first time in years, feeling like the competent professional who had always been. "I have, and I also know that this is just the beginning of what we can build together." What Richard had no idea was that Rosa had researched discreetly about other companies and discovered a network of social responsibility that could be expanded far beyond what any of them imagined. The cleaning lady had become the strategist of a social impact empire that was about to be born. "Rosa," Richard said, closing the folder from the medical center project, "there is one thing I need to tell you before we move on." He got up and walked to the office window, contemplating the garden where Thomas played with Isabella. "Remember when I mentioned that I don't believe in coincidences? Well, it wasn't exactly a coincidence you being working here." Rosa felt a cold in her pimple. "What do you mean?" 2 years ago, when we decided to hire a new domestic employee, I was specifically looking for Salvadoran immigrants. Richard turned to face her. "I wanted to find you, Rosa, or someone like you." Rosa's thoughts ran. Did you go to me purposely?" After I came back from El Salvador in 2010, I could never forget the nurse who saved my life. I tried to find her for years, but the hospital had lost many records during the conflicts. Richard paused. "So I decided to do it differently. I created a job program specifically directed to Central American immigrants with medical experience." Rosa got up, processing the information. "How many people did you interview before me?" 17, Richard confessed. They were all nurses or qualified techniques living as domestic. And you know what I discovered? There was a standard. Extremely competent medical professionals being wasted because their diplomas were not recognized here. So I was an experiment? At first, yes, Richard admitted honestly. But when I saw you save Thomas, when I read about your professional career, when I realized your leadership ability, Rose, you were no longer part of an experiment. You have become the solution to a much larger problem. At that moment, Dr. Patricia Williams entered the office, followed by a man of suit that Rosa did not recognize. Rosa, Dr. Williams smiled. I would like to introduce Dr. Marcus Thompson, Medical Director of St. Mary's Health System Hospitals. Dr. Thompson reached out. It's an honor to know her, Rosa. I read all your pediatric emergency protocols. Impressive. Thank you, Rosa replied, still confused with all revelations. Rosa, Richard continued, your community medical center will not just be a local project. St. Mary's wants to implement it in its 12 hospitals spread across 6 states. Dr. Thompson opened a folder. We are talking about an initial investment of $8 million to establish the first pilot center. If the results are as we expect, and based on your experience we know they will, we will expand nationally. Rosa sat again, trying to absorb the magnitude of what she was hearing. I don't understand. How is it possible? Because, Dr. Williams explained, Richard didn't just save you, Rosa. He has identified a systemic problem, and you have become the key to solving it. There are thousands of qualified medical professionals working on underemployment because they can't validate their diplomas. Richard sat next to Rosa. Remember the other 17 women I interviewed? They are all now on the Revalid program medical action I created. Half is already working again in the health area. Did you do it all because of a debt of gratitude? Rosa asked, thrilled. No, Richard shook his head. I started by gratitude, but I continued because I discovered something revolutionary. You and professionals like you are not just immigrants looking for a second chance. You are the solution to the crisis of health professionals this country faces. Dr. Thompson showed impressive statistics. American hospitals have a shortage of 275,000 qualified nurses. Meanwhile, we estimate that there are over 80,000 qualified immigrant medical professionals working in other areas because they are unable to revalidate. Rosa, Dr. Williams continued, her pediatric emergency protocol has saved dozens of lives since we started testing it, but its training center has the potential to save thousands. Richard got up and went to the office safe, removing an official document. Rosa Martinez, I am pleased to offer you the position of National Director of the Medical Integration Program for Immigrant Professionals. Rosa read the document, her hands shaking. Salary of $185,000 annually, full benefits for the whole family, budget of $15 million for the first year of the program. But I didn't even finish my revalidation yet, she protested. Your practical knowledge is worth more than any diploma, Dr. Thompson replied. In addition, you will be the first person to graduate from the accelerated revalidation program we specifically created for professionals with your experience. There is one last thing, Richard said, removing another envelope from the vault. A small bonus for saving Thomas, and for saving my life for 15 years. Inside the envelope, a $500,000 check, and the deeds of a house in the same neighborhood where Richard lived. I can't accept it, Rosa whispered, tears running down her face. Rosa, Isabella appeared at the door, carrying Thomas on her lap. You saved my son, you saved my husband, and now it will save thousands of families through your work. If anyone deserves it, it's you. Thomas reached out to Rosa, who took him on his lap. The same baby who had saved 3 months ago now represented much more than a saved life, represented the bridge between his past as a Salvadoran nurse and his future as leader of a movement that would transform the American health system. I accept, Rosa said finally, but with one condition. I want the first 17 women you interviewed to be my regional coordinators. They know the fight, know the pain, and will know exactly how to help other families. Richard smiled. I was already counting on that. While Rosa held Thomas and signed the documents that would change her life forever, she realized that there was something much bigger at stake than gratitude or coincidence. For the first time in years, it was not just an immigrant struggling to survive. She had become the architect of a silent revolution that would return dignity and purpose to thousands of professionals like her. What began with a choking baby at 3:47 a.m. had become the birth of a movement that would rewrite the rules on how America treats its qualified immigrants. And Rosa Martinez, the cleaning lady who once saved lives in El Salvador, was about to save lives again, but this time, on a scale she could not have imagined. 6 months later, Rosa Martinez walked through the corridors of Georgetown Hospital, not as a cleaning lady but as a national director of the Medical Integration Program for Immigrant Professionals. His white lab coat bears his name embroidered in gold letters, and the official badge hanging around his neck showed his smiling photo, next to the title he never imagined he had again. "Dr. Martinez," called Dr. Thompson, approaching with a folder in his hands. "The first quarter figures have arrived. Its program has already revalidated 847 medical professionals in 6 states. Partner hospitals' satisfaction rates are 97%. Rosa smiled, still getting used to being treated by the title she had lost years ago. "And the 17 regional coordinators? All promoted to supervisors of their respective regions. Carmen, which you have indicated to direct the center of Los Angeles, has just been appointed medical director of the largest public hospital in the city." Dr. Thompson threw the reports. "You know, Rosa, when Richard introduced us to this project, I doubted that it would work on a large scale. Today I can say, you created a revolution." On the same day, Richard received a call that made him smile from ear to ear. "Mr. Whitmore, here is from CNN. We would like to do a story about Dr. Martinez's program. We knew it started when she saved her son." "Sure," Richard replied. "Look the window of the office where Thomas played in the garden with Isabella. But the real story is not about my gratitude. It's about how a Salvadoreña nurse proved that talent has no nationality." Rosa had moved to the house that Richard had given her as a gift, an elegant residence just 3 blocks from the Whitmore mansion. Miguel and Sophia now attended the same private school that Thomas would attend when he grew up. The two had become fluent in English and dreamed of pursuing medical careers like their mother. "Mom," Sophia said one afternoon while Rosa helped with the homework at the kitchen table of her own home, "do you regret coming here?" Rosa paused, remembering the woman who had arrived in the United States 3 years earlier, desperate, fearful, cleaning houses to survive. "No, my daughter. Every difficulty we have brought us here. Sometimes life tests us to prepare us for something bigger." The Community Medical Training Center had become a national model. Universities from all over the country wanted to replicate the program, and Rosa constantly traveled to give lectures on the integration of qualified immigrant professionals. Its pediatric emergency protocol was now part of the mandatory curriculum in medical schools in 15 states. During a graduation ceremony in the first center, Rosa watched proudly while 156 professionals received their revalidation certifications. Among them was Maria, a Guatemalate surgeon who worked as a chambermaid, Dr. Ahmed, a Syrian pediatrician who made food deliveries, and Elena, a Venezuelan psychiatrist who cleaned offices at dawn. "Each of you," Rosa said to the microphone, "proves that the value of a person is not in your current situation, but in your ability to serve humanity. You are not just revalidated professionals, you are symbols of hope for millions of qualified immigrants." The audience rose in applause, many with tears in his eyes. At the bottom of the auditorium, Richard and Isabella watched with Thomas on her lap. The baby that Rosa had saved now was 1.5 years, and whenever he saw Rosa, he extended his arms to her, as if he instinctively recognized those who had given him a second chance of life. The biggest recognition came when Rosa received the National Award for Community Health Leadership. During her speech at the ceremony in Washington, she looked at the audience full of medical authorities, politicians, and journalists. "A year ago, I cleaned floors thinking that my medical career had ended forever," she started. "Today, I understand that I was not cleaning floors. I was cleaning the way so that other professionals like me could walk with dignity." She paused, her voice loaded with emotion. "The gratitude I feel for Richard and Isabella Whitmore is not just because they give me an opportunity. It's because they remember that sometimes saving a life can save thousands of others." Behind the scenes, Richard watched with a proud smile. 15 years after Rosa saved her life in El Salvador, he had managed to return, but found that she had turned this retribution into something much larger than any of them could imagine. The Rosa program now operated in 20 states, with an annual budget of $45 million. More than 3,200 immigrant medical professionals had been revalidated, filling a critical gap in the U.S. health system. What began as gratitude had become a silent revolution. The true reward, Pink reflects on interviews when asked about his journey, it was not the salary, the home, or the recognition. It was finding that my suffering had a purpose, preparing to help others find their own paths back to dignity. Rosa Martinez has proven that the best revenge against a system that wasted talent is not to store grudge, is to transform obstacles into bridges so that others do not need to go through the same trials. From immigrant cleaning lady to national leader, she rewritten not only her own history, but the rules on how America sees and values her qualified immigrants. If this story of overcoming and transformation has touched your heart, Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes the most unlikely ending is exactly the one we needed to hear, where justice is not just done, but multiplied in thousands of transformed lives.